So the next part is, how to access committed spend. This is very timely because the commit is typically tied to the calendar year. And I have an example to share with you that I'm going to show you a quick video. This is Peter Irwin and his experience working with the Azure Marketplace and the customer committed spend.
Cloud marketplaces have an amazing set of benefits that very few salespeople are taking advantage of right now. I mean, there's a real opportunity to sell way more and close deals faster. When I was leading a sales team at Spot by NetApp, I was involved in a big deal where one of my aides leveraged the cloud marketplace to take advantage of tripling his deal size. We got to a point with the customer where they were sold on the tech, and we started the how to buy discussion. While discovering that buying process, we uncovered that they had a few million in unused committed spend with Azure that was likely to fall by the wayside at the end of their Mac term in just a few months. When we asked them how much they had to work with, turns out there was $1.8 million on the table. I got to say, it was like discovering a golden nugget, only to realize it was just the tip of the iceberg. We suggested they use it to purchase 3 years up front, and the crazy thing is they were happy to do it. They spent money that was otherwise going to be wasted. The deal went from 500 grand to a 1.5 million, all collected and paid up front. Just think about that. The deal tripled in size because we were able to use their committed spend. Not only that, but we locked them in for 3 years and collected all the cash up front. I don't know what the process would have looked like without it, but I imagine we saved at least a month. Procurement suddenly accelerated, and they were happy to get all the approvals and financial benefits in place. It was Q4, so it was huge for us to get it closed in time, and it was all there because of the benefits of the cloud marketplaces. We sort of came across this by accident. G3 helps you build the benefits of this into your sales process so your team can proactively access that committed spend. But it's important to start early and use the benefits throughout. It's great that G3 will be offering courses in short segments that are specific to each step of the sales process, starting from the first intro to the end. You don't want to miss out because you didn't know earlier there was money laying on the table. I definitely recommend by listing in the marketplace, use G3 coaching to get up to speed. The differences can be dramatic.
So a pretty amazing story. Increasing a deal by $1 million is absolutely, significant, and not only to your own personal business, but typically makes a big with whatever company that you're working for. So I wanted to touch on prerequisites because I think it's important to know you can access it or what you need to have in place before you do. Obviously, you need a current partnership. You have to have access to a listing, of course, in the respective marketplace. And then the key thing, of course, is that the customer has a commit. Not all customers have a commit. Usually larger customers do. As you can imagine, they're going to negotiate a deal with any customer that has a significant amount of revenue that's tied to infrastructure in the cloud. But important to know, if the customer doesn't have a commit, it doesn't mean that you can't use the marketplace, because like I mentioned, there's a bunch of other advantages. They're not specific to the commit. So in other words, aligning with their initiative to consolidate vendors or offering payment terms is super powerful. So the commit itself, this word has kind of been floating around. I think a lot of salespeople have heard it, and it's unknown kind of what exactly it is or how it works. But a commit is actually a committed cloud spend. So, and this comes about by cloud providers negotiating based on a commitment to spend a certain amount. And then once that's committed, the customer has to spend that much or they lose it. So what's critical to understand for salespeople, if you have a listing in the marketplace, is that the committed spend can be used to buy your software. And I think that that's probably already clear by now, but I wanted to make a big point with this because it's actually the key thing to leveraging this option. So the commit by cloud provider, they call them different names. This is also super important to know. They typically do not use the whole phrase. They will refer to it, or excuse me, US will refer to it as EDP, and Mac, like Peter referred to in the video, what Microsoft calls their commit. And then Google is either a cut or a SUD. So using those terms will help people understand that you know what you're doing and that you're up to speed on the marketplaces and the cloud providers and how they work. And that also contributes to best practices with the co-sell situation, because what I have here in blue are the different names of the portals, but this isn't required in order to access committed spend or use the marketplace for a purchase, but it is definitely a best practice to partner with the cloud providers. And typically that's through the portal where you're entering an opportunity. The opportunity is essentially like a registration. It's very important to know how to complete the opportunity because they're typically under a lot of scrutiny. They want to make sure that the deal typically would be passed like 50% likely, because it's way better to have deals that are happening that are in the portal than to be reaching out just for the purpose of getting their attention. It could backfire if you actually do that. So the idea here is to identify and engage with the cloud provider sales team and be able to work with them so that you can combine the co-sell with the cloud marketplace. In terms of introducing the idea, what I've seen is that even though there are a lot of salespeople out there whose companies have a listing, or channel salespeople who can use a listing from one of the ISVs that they work with, and that's a known thing. People have heard of the commit, but there's big question marks about how you actually engage. How do you bring it up? How does it work if you do bring it up? Most people are not aware of this. And so speaking the language of the cloud provider is super important in this, especially in this context. And it's key to really approaching it with the customer. If you know what you're doing, then you can bring it up with them and have confidence that they can move forward, and they'll have confidence in you as well. And again, it's a major differentiator when it comes to the sales process. So I'm just going to go through a couple of different scenarios here where this is how you bring it up. I'm not going to read each one. I will provide the deck afterwards so that if you want to use this specifically, I purposely did this in a way that you can actually use the language here when you're talking to the customer. But what I have here is a long shot deal would be the first scenario where, say, they went dark and you can't get their attention again, or they lost budget and now things are stuck, or it's maybe an expand deal where you already have the software running it. They're already a customer in one business unit, and there's another business unit that's considering buying, but there's no way you get the deal before the end of December. In this case, bring it up. Hey, if you have a commit, do you realize you can use that to purchase our product? Of course, you would only say that if they were near purchasing and backed out at that point. But the point is here, bring it up and see if they have a commit, because that could open the discussion back up. You can find out if the deal is actually real. It's one way to find out. It gives you the opportunity to re-engage. And then, of course, by doing this at this stage on November 15th, trying to close the deal at the end of December, for instance, this gives you a real opportunity to do that. So the other thing is in the middle of the sales process, and this one is really, really important point here, is that if you look at the value associated with bringing it up, then there's a lot. So that's why it's super important to build this in throughout the sales process, the concepts and the benefits, because at this point you can trial close. So for instance, if you get to the end, if you're not familiar with that term trial close, it essentially means asking questions to find out how likely it is the customer is going to go with your solution. In this case, if you have two different procurement options, hey, you can purchase using a purchase order in the traditional method, or you can purchase using a private offer in the cloud marketplace. Would you be open to the private offer process? If they don't know what it is, it gives you a perfect opportunity to open up that discussion. If they do know what it is, it separates you from your competition if they don't have a listing in the marketplace or they don't bring it up. Most people are not bringing it up, so it's a major advantage here. If you're already in negotiations, it's not too late. You can just bring it up, and if you have a listing, maybe it's just brought to your attention, so you have a reason that it wasn't brought up already, and you recommend that they check with procurement, because procurement may look at this as an opportunity. Hey, this makes you more valuable if they have a consolidation initiative. It makes you more valuable if they can draw down their commit. And of course, you can potentially grow the deal, which of course benefits you. The fourth scenario is just pricing is already agreed. Maybe the procurement process has already started. It's still not too late to bring it up. It still may be advantageous to the customer from their perspective to use a committed spend if that hasn't come up in the conversation and the procurement department knows about it. And even if they don't, and it's too late or the process goes forward, it's still something that separates you from other salespeople and other vendors. So once you've had that discussion and you brought it up with the customer, then it's the options that you have are to do what Peter did when he was at NetApp, which is to send a multi-year deal. The awesome thing about that is if they're going to use committed cloud spend, they pay the whole thing up front, which is absolutely huge. You can also sell additional licenses if there's a scenario where they need more seats or they need more nodes, but they were limited by budget. A variety of things you can use this for. Then when you get to the point that you're actually going to move forward and you're going to use that committed spend, it's a pretty simple process that you go through. This setup, what is, again, I mentioned the term private offer. It's really just a form that you fill out, and it's based on the agreed upon price. So if you see what I mean, going back to earlier of this concept of the catalog, really you're agreeing to a price and you're putting that in the private offer. You're sending that to the customer. You need to get their cloud provider ID before you do that, because that's required in order to submit the offer. And then the customer gets it, they accept the offer, and the deal is done. So you've completed the process. That's basically wraps up the committed cloud spend.